Hello, and welcome to the Warren County Movie Podcast. Recorded live from Chica's house with your hosts, Jamila and Chris.
So this is finally it. After a long time talking about it, I think it's been a couple of years we've talked about doing this. We are going to make the movie podcast that we've wanted to make, where we basically talk shit about films.
So true.
Moving forwards, we're going to have lots of episodes where we do mini reviews, full-length reviews. I think we're toying with the idea of actually doing almost film commentaries where we would play the film in full while we talk nonsense over it, as well as comparison reviews, which I think is going to be a big part of what we do, where we take remakes of films that we originally loved or loved the remake of and just compare them to their counterpart. Before we do all of that, though, I think it's important that we have a pretty decent idea of who we are for the people that do end up listening, so they can at least gauge how much they can trust us.
Not so much.
So I'm Chris.
I'm Jamila.
And we have been in a relationship for
16 years.
And married for
7.5.
It's very good of you to fill in the blanks there.
I think you already knew the answers though, didn't you?
Yeah, you hammer it home quite a lot. So we're coming live from Chica's house, which is the studio in which we are currently residing. And what we're going to do for this episode in particular is we just want to talk through both of our top 10 favorite all-time films. Not the top 10 best films we've ever seen, because there's a slight difference.
Yeah.
But we're going to each take a turn doing our top 10s and also a list of honorable mentions. And this is something that you found to be quite difficult, right?
Really difficult, yeah. Because as you know, I love films and I've watched so many of them. And there are so many that I had in my top 10 list that have been bounced down a little bit because other ones have come in. And then you think, oh no, because that's still one of my most favorite films. And so it's very hard to select those top 10. And then even harder to then order them.
Yeah.
From 1 to 10. That I actually found harder. So
the problem I was found when I was putting this list together was separating my nostalgia of a film compared to how much I actually enjoy the film. Because there's films I remember fondly, but I'll never watch again. If that makes sense. Like I enjoyed them, but I'll never really reach for them out of the Blu-ray collection, or if maybe if they're on TV and we're somewhere, I'd watch them, but they're not ones that I have a real urge to watch over and over. And I think that's usually the sign of a film that you just have nostalgia for, but maybe not a film that you actually really loved.
Yeah. Yeah, I get what you mean. Like, funny enough, this is a weird one, but the Beethoven films. And the reason why I bring this up was because wherever the last wedding was that we did, the TV was on and a Beethoven film was on as well. Mm-hmm. And I remember thinking to myself, God, I used to love these films when I was a kid, but I have never seen them since I was a kid and probably will never watch them again. And I don't think it's something when introduced to my niece. So, but I get what you mean. It's the nostalgia behind.
I can only remember one thing from the Beethoven movies, which is where the guy smears like fake blood on himself and he says, this is going to hurt me a lot more than it's going to hurt you, or something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
Other than that, I don't remember anything of the Beethoven movies at all. I think I had a real aversion to watching films with dogs in, because I think one of the first films I watched had dogs in, the dog died.
Oh,
and I was just like, fuck this. This is bullshit.
No, there were some good ones. Like Homeward Bound was a really good kids film with dogs and cats in. So that was... Yeah, you missed out on the great ones. So I'm really sorry you got stuck with the bad ones first.
So we got together 16 years ago and our first official date was to the movies to watch 50 First Dates.
Yep.
Which I've never watched since and have no desire to ever watch again. You obviously have that nostalgic love for it because of where it led us to. But in a grand sense, in a very, very general sense, what is your taste in movies?
It's between horror and action. They're my two main genres of films. And then that closely follows, not closely, but then that follows with comedies. I have an absolute hatred for tearjerker films. Right. I don't like them. And romantic comedies, when I say our generation of romantic comedies, as in when we were teenagers, but I'm not really a fan of what they consider to be a romantic comedy today. They're just a bit...
Well, I think like mid-80s to mid-noughties,
yes,
there was a lot of there was a lot of good exceptions to the general rule of them being shite.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm not a fan at all of romantic comedies, but there are definitely some in that time period that I think were really good.
Yeah. But tearjerkers are a no. I don't like a sad film. They can literally go fuck themselves really hard. I don't understand why you'd want to sit there.
I think we differ slightly there. I don't mind certain films that I punish myself with. In fact, one makes my top 10 that I punish myself with because I think that's one of the great things about movies is a lot like music. You can use it to really... It's almost a drug. You can use it to alter your mood. If you're in a bad mood, you can watch something to pick yourself up. And if you need something to kind of, if you've got an emotion lodged in your systems, you can use a movie to sort of unlodge it and break it free. And you can kind of, get that out of your system by the end of the movie. And then it's kind of cathartic in a way.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose I'm like that with all other genres of films, but when it comes to the tearjerkers, I'm not. There's enough sadness. There has been enough sadness in my life, and there's also been enough sadness in the real world that I don't want to sit there for an hour and a half, 2 hours and cry feeling really upset or be reminded of something traumatic that happened in my life as well. Where possible, I don't really want to have to relive those sad feelings. So for me, those films are just fuck off and leave me alone. They're good for other people, but not for me.
That's where I'm different because I have that same indifference towards films where everybody just argues all the time. Because I've seen enough arguments. I think most of social media is people arguing or people sort of obtrusively shouting their point at people, hoping that people will listen to them.
Yeah.
I don't want to spend 2 hours of my life watching pretend people have pretend arguments.
Yeah.
Unless there's really something overarching. There's a lot of TV shows that I've tried to watch over the years. I'm not really a big series watcher, and I just get very frustrated when it's just sort of very thinly veiled plot device conflict for the sake of it. And that is just instant turn off the TV, go away heat for me. It's not fun at all.
Yeah.
I think we need to decide who's going to go first here. I think we do, each one of us does their full top 10 rather than we go back and forth, because I know for a fact that there's at least 2 films that are going to be on both our lists, maybe more.
Yeah.
And rather than like me talk about something and then 30 seconds later you're talking about it, or it's not going to go in the right order. So we have to decide who goes first.
Well, I think you should go first, and I'll tell you for why. Because you need to tell us about the genres of films that are
what my general taste is.
I could not think of the words then. I got really stuck.
So generally speaking, the place that we bond the most is horror.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that our favorite films are all going to be horror films, because I think in terms of ratio, horror is probably the worst genre of movies for good to bad.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of shit.
Yeah.
For you to find a gem, like a lot of shit.
Yeah.
And especially now, in the last sort of 5 years, horror has become a turgid pit of sound effects and jump scares without any real plot, and a lot of reliance on CGI, which is possibly the worst thing any movie can rely on.
Yeah.
So we bond over horror. I'm not such a big action film person. We're kind of the wrong way round, I guess, to gender normatives in that.
Yeah.
But I'm a big fan of psychological horrors. I love anything that is serial killer based or documentary based, in the sense of it takes a historic event and works around that. As we'll get into, anything that Fincher has touched generally I think is brilliant, with the exception of his whack at Aliens, which was the studio's fault, not his fault. I can't blame him at all. And yeah, I'm the genres I struggle the most with are action, because I don't find explosions exciting enough to mask how shite some of the acting is.
It's so the opposite. The more explosions and the more gunfire, the pew, the better for me.
Yeah. Whereas I struggle with action. If there's a good action film, then it's a good film, but it has to be a good film.
Yeah.
But I would say the genre that I struggle with the absolute most is comedy. I don't generally like watching comedy films because I have a very, very strong theory, and I imagine in the future episodes of this, I'm going to non-stop talk about this. But here's why horror is the best genre of movie, and kind of along with action, I guess, and comedy is the worst.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so horror movies, if they are terrible, they're usually pretty funny, right? They're usually entertaining. The same, I guess, with action films. When they're really terrible, they can be very funny.
Yeah, exactly.
But when you have a comedy that's not funny, it's just horrible. It's like getting a prostate exam from your uncle. It's that level of awkward and tedious and horrible, and
You just want to jab your eyes out with a fork.
yeah, and there's a lot of bad comedy because I mean, obviously I can't really say bad comedy because it's subjective, but I feel like there's a lot of lazy comedy now where they just get people that are loosely funny into a room and they give them a very, very bare premise and let them just riff and then cut it all together. And sometimes you get Anchorman and sometimes you get Anchorman 2.
Yeah.
Or you get Ghostbusters, whatever it was, 2017, that, where it's
The
just
ladies edition.
the ladies edition, where it just wasn't funny
Yeah.
because there was no, firstly, the problem with that film was there was no straight person, as in there was no someone playing it straight, and that gave context to the silliness.
Yeah.
You can't just have 5 or 6 people being silly
Yeah.
because that's just watching children play.
I think that's part of the problem where you get, because it's basically an SNL film.
Yeah.
And because it's basically all the cast from SNL, it's like, oh, let's chuck them all in there. They're really, really funny. We'll make it seem legit by getting cameos from the original actors. And I think the problem is it's the problem nowadays with a lot of the Adam Sandler films, and has been for, I would presume, probably the last decade.
Mm-hmm.
Like his films in the last decade have just been him and his same group of friends with a video camera pulling the same jokes.
Right.
So I think it's kind of that the badder comedies are down to the groups of people just sticking
Where it's
together.
just people scratching each other's backs.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that's why I think horror is the best genre anyway, because it's something that even when it's terrible, it's usually pretty funny, and when it's good, it's quite visceral and it does quite a lot to you emotionally anyway. So what are we going to do here then? So do you want me to go first?
Yeah, you go first.
So I'm going to work from 10 to 1.
Okay.
Or do you want me to talk about my honourable mentions first?
Oh, yeah, go for honourable mentions, then we can build up to the top 10.
Okay, so what I'll do is I'll explain what my honourable mentions are, and I'll very briefly, I'll just talk about why they're not in my top 10.
Okay.
What the factor is that's pulled them out. Okay, so Parasite is not in my top 10, but it's an honourable mention. One of an amazing set of films that came around sort of 2019 into 2020, depending on where you were, was when it was released. It's obviously an absolute masterclass in filmmaking and in visual metaphor. It's got an incredible ability to show, not tell, which I think is fantastic. The reason it doesn't make it into my top 10 is because I just don't have nostalgia for it. I came out of the cinema thinking it was brilliant. I really enjoyed it. I just didn't come out feeling particularly emotionally connected to it.
Mm-hmm.
I watched it as a photographer more than I watched it as a human being. And whilst it drew me in as a human being, I just didn't come out of the cinema feeling like it was the most emotionally interesting thing I'd ever absorbed, I guess. It's what I think if I'd have seeked it out that way, maybe I would feel different, but it didn't do that for me. Probably a surprising honorable mention would be Joker.
Wow, honourable mention.
An honorable mention. The only film I've ever been to the cinema 4 times to watch.
I thought it was more, but shit.
It was 4. It was supposed to be 5, but I had a migraine, didn't go the 5th time. The reason it's an honorable mention is because it has a very important scene I think is really let down by some of the way that it's portrayed, which I'll get to. But why that film is so brilliant is first and foremost the score. I fell in love with the music from that film. I get goosebumps every time I hear the score from that film. And not just the score, but also the soundtrack. The use of Gary Glitter, I think, was amazing. The use of Cream, I think, was amazing. It's just, obviously, Joaquin Phoenix is what he is. He's just an absolute master at what he does at portraying these characters. It was, I think, a career-defining performance.
Yeah.
I wish it didn't have the references to comic books in it, because I think that the film as it was, could just take out the references to comic books and actually just use it as a political drama, almost like a drama about a person suffering with mental health, also mixed in with the politics that was involved. And then it would have been probably in my top 5.
Yeah.
I found the references to Batman and the comic books, I just find that very boring. And I know that sounds ridiculous to have a film about Joker, but you know that film could be made and just not be a comic book film because it's not a superhero film.
Yeah.
It's a film about a gentleman with severe mental health problems, not getting the help that he needs, and how that then impacts his life moving forwards.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of theories about whether or not any of it even happened, but it's a fantastic film. I just wish it didn't have the references to Batman. I also think the scene on the train where he kills the three men that are sort of beating him up and being general drunk dickheads, it was a bit cheesy in places. It does have my favorite moment in the whole film, where he shoots the 2 guys and shoots the third one who's running away, but doesn't kill him. And then he stands there and he has that moment where he doesn't know what he's done. You can see that he's trying to process the situation that he's in, and he actually waves the gun at his own head for like a quarter of a second. And I think it's such a clever moment to include because it shows that he, like, in that moment, was he going to kill that guy? Was he just going to shoot himself? He did not have the tools mentally to understand what he had just done. Yeah. And it was like, spare of the moment. There's no time to make this decision. So that's why it doesn't make the top 10. I also already have one comic book film make my top 10, and I'm probably never going to allow 2 to ever be in there because I'm so sick of the genre.
But I am very surprised at Joker. I'll be honest with you.
Yeah.
Very.
Very closely tied, and I'll talk a lot less about this one, but is You Were Never Really Here, also Joaquin Phoenix. I think it has a load of ties with Joker in the presentation. Some of the set pieces are very similar. The ending, I think, is fantastic. It's a brilliant movie. It's got a lot of emotional impact whilst not being boring, which a lot of emotional films like the ones you don't like certainly have that problem of just being lots of people swanning about with emotions, and you're supposed to be so captivated by people crying. This is something that I feel like has it has a lot of grit. It has a lot of dark moments. It has a lot of fantastically drawn out pregnant pauses. But the reason it doesn't make my top 10 is it just didn't resonate with me as much as the ones that did. It's probably 11 or 12. It's close. Next up is The Irishman.
Oh yeah, you've talked a lot about this film.
Absolutely brilliant. Pretty much faultless, with the exception of one egregiously bad edit, which I cannot believe has not been picked up by more people. It is astonishingly bad. I don't know how that was allowed to be in a Scorsese film. There's an incredibly bad, basically towards the end of the film, I'm not going to do any spoilers, but Robert De Niro's character has to make a phone call.
Yeah.
To someone he knows' wife. I can't say any more than that, otherwise it spoils the film. Yeah. But when he goes to make this phone call, there's 2 cuts of him saying hello that don't overlap. So it's like there was 2 takes and they accidentally left both takes in, one after the other. And I was editing whilst I was watching it the second time. And I had, even though I already knew it was in there, I had to stop what I was doing and just have like 5 minutes because it annoyed me that made its way into a Scorsese film. The other obvious problem being that it takes like 1/8 of a day to watch it. It's a very, very long film. It's definitely worth it, but I feel like it probably could have been 2 parts. Devil's Rejects, probably Rob Zombie's only good film. Mm-hmm. I haven't seen 3 from Hell. I'm probably going to at some point in the next couple of weeks, but I can't imagine it's going to come anywhere near this list. Devil's Rejects, I think, was one of those situations where the aesthetics, the acting, the story, and the timing of the movie played into everything working out in a very good way. He's another gentleman that has way too much loyalty to people he's worked with before, and he doesn't cast the right people for the job.
Yeah.
He casts whoever his friends are who are available, and that's always very frustrating. And it's got a fantastic end set piece with Lynyrd Skynyrd being very prominent, so that's always going to be popular with me. A Fincher film that doesn't make its way into my top 10 is Seven.
Wow.
The reason Seven doesn't make it essentially is that the scene, I don't feel like I need to worry about spoilers on this.
No.
Like, this film is 20 years old or whatever.
If you haven't seen it by now, then you're not living life, really.
Yeah. If you somehow found this podcast but haven't seen that film, you can go fuck yourself. The scene where the guy is forced to use it's just not a fun sentence, but use the knife strap on.
Yes.
The acting is so bad. He's the murderer who's a victim, if that makes sense. Yep. Watch the film, you'll understand what I mean. His acting is so bad. Every time he gets to that part of the film, I skip. Everything else in that movie is damn close to perfect.
Yeah.
And that is such a pivotal death in the film. I hate that fucking actor so much. He ruined the Fincher film for me. Now, I'm not saying that film's ruined. Yeah. But now when I watch it, I have to skip over that, which I'm not happy about
that's
at all.
Good.
Another film that doesn't make my top 10 that I think you'd be probably quite surprised about is Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. The reason it doesn't make it is because there's plenty of things wrong with that film. And I've seen a lot of reviews about the film claiming that it's a fandom film, that the only people that like it are blind lovers of the source material. I don't know the source material particularly well at all. I was never a fan.
Yeah.
But it reminds me so much of things that piqued my interest in horror when I was an early teenager, or, just before becoming a teenager. Things like Are You Afraid of the Dark? Goosebumps. It reminds me a lot of that stuff, but it's just like the next level up. A couple of really egregious problems in that film. One of the character designs for like the evil character is actually hilarious. It's not scary. And there's a character who dies but doesn't die, and they don't really do a good job of explaining what's gone on there. But otherwise, it's a really fun film. The aesthetics of that film, it's a really cool film, especially as me and you have talked about ad nauseum lately. Old retro looking films, always cool. Anything that hasn't got a fucking mobile phone in it gets my vote.
Yeah.
Now, this was originally going to be Ghost Stories.
Okay.
But I took that out of my honorable mentions because we were only allowed 10 honorable mentions. And I actually replaced it with a really unknown film for a lot of people, but one that me and you saw in the cinema. And I have some really funny memories about seeing this in the cinema with a crazy single lady with about 5 or 6 different Chinese food packets around her, with her bare feet up on the seat, screaming with laughter the whole way through. But that's Kiss Kiss Bang Bang.
Oh, what a film.
I think probably Robert Downey Jr.'s best film.
Yeah.
And I'm sure I'm going to get absolutely...
Val Kilmer's best film as well.
Yeah, exactly. I think Val Kilmer's hilarious. And he plays the straight down the line guy. And Robert Downey Jr. sort of weaves between silliness and being the straight guy. It's got... Is it Michelle Monaghan?
Yes.
Who I'm sure Helene...
I feel like I'm going to double check that, but yeah, I think that's right. Yeah.
You double check it and I'll carry on talking nonsense. But with the exception of her, I think everyone in the film is pretty brilliant. The storyline is dark, but they managed to make a lot of jokes out of it. It's got a little bit of silliness to it. It's got a little bit of like real world consequences, which comedies very rarely have. It touches on subjects that comedies don't normally like to go near, like pedophilia.
Yeah.
But it's not like laughing at victims of pedophilia or anything like that. It's just a very funny film. It's a brilliant film, and not enough people have seen it, so I feel like it had to go in there just to force more people to go and see it.
Yeah, I think so. And yes, you were right. It is Michelle Monaghan.
She's absolutely wooden, but she serves a purpose in that film.
She does. She just needs to be surrounded by people that can act, and she gets away with it.
Yeah. If you're looking for a prime example of her woodenness, I would say just watch Sleepless. The only Winding Refn film that's going to make it in any of this, which I'm a bit sad about, because Neon Demon is a weird film. It's stuck with me, but it is just so boring, is Drive. And it doesn't make my top 10 because I think it's a little bit thin on the ground in terms of substance.
Yeah.
But everyone in it is brilliant. The visuals are brilliant. There's really no way to fault the film. I think in some places the soundtrack is a little bit on the nose,
Mm-hmm.
but it's a brilliant film. It's just a really good film. Ryan Gosling's obviously asserted himself as being a fantastic actor. I can't really, it's got Bryan Cranston in it. It's just a very cool film. I mean, it's even got a retro vibe to it without it being forced. It's just everything about it seems to work quite nicely.
Yeah.
It's just a little bit thin. It doesn't emotionally
I like the
resonate with me.
actress in it as well.
I can't remember her name.
I can't remember her name, but she suits his character
She's
really
understated.
well.
It's not like she's a supermodel who lives down the hallway and no one seems to notice, which is like one of the most irritating things with Hollywood.
Yeah.
Is that they think that every woman has to look like she belongs on a catwalk.
Yeah.
To be able to even be a love interest. It's so stupid. And my last honorable mention is Nightcrawler, which I think is fantastic. I really do. I don't like the ending particularly.
Yeah.
I get it. I get what the ending's trying to do. And I get the sense of it. I just think it's a bit cheesy. And I'm not going to say what the ending is because I feel like that would be spoiling it. It's still
relatively new.
It's young enough.
Yeah.
I think obviously Gyllenhaal is an absolute master. I think we are really blessed at the moment with a lot of fantastic actors and actresses. But just the ending kind of soured me a bit. This was between Nocturnal Animals and Nightcrawler. And I just feel like Nightcrawler, Gyllenhaal was just a bit better.
Yeah.
Which made it resonate with me a bit more. So those are my honourable mentions.
That's quite a good list of honourable mentions.
It wouldn't be a bad top 10, I think, with the exception maybe of Devil's Rejects for most people. I don't think I would be under much fire.
No, I quite like that. I like the honourable mentions list. Quite a few of them surprised me. I thought they would make your top 10, which I think I know most of what's in your top 10, but because like the Joker and that isn't in there, I'm now very curious.
Well, one thing is we haven't shown each other the list.
Yeah.
So I do know probably what's in yours, but I don't know in what order. And you did surprise me earlier by saying one film didn't make it, which is the only thing I know about yours. Do you want to do your honourable mentions and then I'll do my top 10?
Yeah, go on then. Okay, so my honourable mentions, these are in no particular order because I just couldn't decide why they couldn't be in my top 10. So first of all is Speed. I know many people dislike that film, but I absolutely love that film. It has so many good memories for me. And when I first watched it was the summer holidays of, I want to say 98, probably 97, 98. And they played it on Sky Movies and they did the premiere on the Friday night and they put it on repeat on Sky Movies during the day. So me and my mum set it up to recorded it. And then I watched it every single day on repeat for the rest of that summer. Absolutely love that film. And I can't not love a Keanu Reeves film. The action's great. The cheesy one-liners in it are amazing. It just has so much nostalgia for it. This was a film that had been in my top 10 for years and now is not. And it's kind of sad, but it's also good because there's been progression in my favourite movie choices. So that's the first one. The second one is 1917. I loved that film. I only saw it once at the cinema and I'm really glad that I saw it at the cinema when I did. It's an absolutely beautiful film. I mean, I don't come at films from the same perspective as you do. I don't look at it really from the cinematic point of view and the shots and the, the photography and the technical points. But oh my God, that film is beautifully, beautifully made. And I love the fact that it's essentially in two scenes. I felt from the beginning so a part of the main characters in the film. And obviously I'm not going to spoil it for anyone that hasn't seen it yet, but you definitely have to see it. And one of the things I particularly liked about that film, I'm not very good at the director. I think it was Mendes, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Was what I really liked about this film was that it was a World War I film that didn't look like every other war film.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean about the way it's shot. I meant the color grading on it. When you look at things like Saving Private Ryan and stuff, it's dark, it's dingy, the colours are all, burnt oranges and reds and browns and greys. And it's very similar with things like Pearl Harbor and stuff like that. They're all those same kind of war films, whereas 1917, it made the colours pop a little bit more when they needed to. The blues were really blue, greens were really green, and it just visually, I really enjoyed the whole prospect of that film.
I think like Saving Private Ryan, I found really muddy.
That's the word, muddy.
Pearl Harbor that's Bay.
Yeah, so obviously there's the boom booms.
There's going to be, but there's, with his color grading, it's like muddy but saturated, so it's slightly different. But yeah, I know what you mean. You mean that kind of almost sepia muddiness.
Yeah, that's the one. So, but 1917 didn't do that, so hugely impressed. And it did win Best Cinematographer for that film, so
Deakins.
Amazing. Then I had Parasite, which also in honorable mentions like yourself. Although, and you came at it again from a very technical point of view, I actually found myself emotionally tied to that film as well. The progression of the characters and the development in their stories, right the way through, irks you and moves you. And then as the story progresses towards the ending, which I'm not going to spoil, but you're a bit like, oh no. And I felt moved by the characters. So I just thought, fantastic film, loved the way it was made. And again, I loved the fact that it was subtitled.
Right.
I'm glad there was no overdubs in English because I think it made the film all the more powerful.
Well, I think, firstly, overdubs are bullshit. But I think that sometimes having a foreign film where it's subtitled hides perhaps what might have been bad acting because you're focused more on the content of what they're saying, not necessarily the delivery. Whereas with your native language, you're going to be a lot more passive to what's actually being said and more focused on cadence and the movement of the person. And if someone could be saying something incredibly important to the plot, but if their acting isn't 100% believable, it can pull you out.
Yeah. Whereas
with subtitles, it's like, well, I get the gist of where they're going. Nothing was egregious because I don't know what egregiously bad acting in Korean is or, in any language.
Yeah.
I think sometimes it can actually help. I'm not saying there was bad acting, but we have films that we've liked in the past that are subtitled. And I think if we probably were native speakers of the language it's in, we would be like, wow, that guy can't fucking act.
Yeah, I can definitely see that point. Okay, so next one is Up. Disney and Pixar's Up. What an absolutely beautiful film. It's just beautiful. The storyline is incredible. It's just about living life, enjoying life, taking every moment as it comes and never letting go of something that you want to do. Just go out there and try it. And relationships and friendships, they come in all kinds of shapes and sizes. And it's just such a happy movie. I fucking love it. And if you haven't seen Up, then you need to go and watch it because it's incredible. I think
it does more emotionally in like the first 2.5 minutes than most films are able to do when they're really trying.
Oh, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a beautiful film, really beautifully made. And Disney and Pixar really do have a good relationship when it comes to making those kinds of films. So yeah. And it's a good all-round family film as well. Okay. Then I've got Red Dragon. I love that film because I love the criminal profiling aspect, the way it was filmed. I love the hunt for who it is. I love the actors. I mean, Norton Fiennes and Hopkins they're just incredible together. And the way they are back and forth with each other is amazing. And Ralph Fiennes, he's incredible.
Yeah.
Every single one of his scenes is amazing. You feel moved with his character. Loved it. Then this is one purely for nostalgia and because I'm still a kid. And
This is going to be bad.
It's going to be bad for everybody that doesn't understand this is just my favourites and not the best films ever made. I'm going to make that perfectly clear. So you want to go at me, that's fine. But The Mighty Morphin Power Rangers
Jesus
is one of my most favourite films ever. It is in my honourable mentions because of nostalgia.
Just had an email saying the podcast has been cancelled. Jesus Christ. Okay.
Yeah. And I also think that to be a true movie fan, I think you have to appreciate that there are just some films that are just pure shite to everyone else, but they just reside with you as an individual. And that film.
Yeah. I mean, to be transparent, I have a couple films like that you know about. A really awful 90s slasher film called Shredder,
Yes.
which is almost Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles reference, but
it is.
It's a really bad film with some atrocious acting, and I spent years finding the DVD of that because I just had memories of it from when I was a kid. So I understand. It's just good God, the Power Rangers.
The Power Rangers. I love the soundtrack. Just everything. I just love everything about that film, and it just makes me feel so happy every time I watch it. Reminds me of my mum, reminds me of my sister. Just that film. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
I love it. Then I've got The Faculty. And the reason why this is in my honorable mentions is because I just loved that era of horror sci-fi movies. I loved it. And I loved that it was aliens. It had loads of my favorite actors in it as well, particularly those that were popular at the time. It was well written.
It had Josh Hartnett.
Elijah Wood.
Elijah Wood. Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Famke Johnson. I can never say her first name properly.
Is that the one that was in X-Men?
Yes.
Right.
It's got Jordan Brewster in, who's in the Fast and Furious.
Yeah. Who, like, that makes her sound like a fucking vampire, because that means that it's been like 30 years, it feels like, since that fucking film.
Yeah, 98.
Okay,
98,
so not, it's 22 years though.
Yeah.
And she was old to be a high schooler then.
Yeah, she was, I think, in her early 20s when she was playing.
She's got that Keanu Reeves thing going on where she just doesn't age.
But yeah, it's just such a good film. You know, I think particularly our generation, you just one of those you had to have watched. Then I've got Seven.
So you got frustrated with me for not having it in my top 10, and then you don't have it in your top 10.
Yeah, I know. Because I was frustrated with myself enough. But Seven, for similar reasons to Red Dragon. Again, it's all that criminal profiling, the detective work, the filming, the storyline, everything with Morgan Freeman in. I love. Just again, such a good film. Then I go to the Blair Witch Project, which gets an honorable mention because that, I think, is probably this is the original Blair Witch, not the remake. This is the 1999 version. It kind of brought the POV stuff to life. It kind of regurgitated it. I don't think there was much of it beforehand.
Well, the original POV was Peeping Tom. So
and that was
quite, I think it's late 60s, off the top of my head.
So good 30 odd years then.
Yeah. And well, you know what? I think both of us loved about Blair Witch was the fact that you knew about it even if you hadn't seen it. The marketing for it and the viral nature that spread was just so cool.
Incredible. The very first thing I heard about this was that there were students that were missing, and there was actual documentaries made about this found footage. So the marketing was impeccable, and it took me years to realize that this was just a movie.
Yeah, I mean, we were primary school when that came out.
Yeah.
So, before people judge.
Yeah. Yeah. We were primary school.
Yeah.
Got it from Apollo. But such a good film. And especially at the time, because I thought that it was all real, creeped the hell out of me. Mm-hmm. And I was a bit like, oh shit, that ghost is lurking around the corner. Oh my God, the stones on the floor. I thought the acting was incredible. When I finally learned that it was just a film, I was shooketh beyond belief.
Right.
And then I learned about how they did the film, and the actors were literally there was a note left outside their tent that morning, and they were literally given one line, and then it was all there's a special phrase for people that just act on the spot or act as it comes. Improvised. Oh my God, that word. Sorry, I'm not very good with that stuff. So yeah, just loved it, and it's a horror movie, so And then my final honourable mention, and this one was really close to making my top 10, was Shape of Water.
Right.
Which I didn't think I was going to enjoy as much. And I absolutely loved that film. So beautifully shot. And it's such a beautiful story about relationships and about there being beauty in everything. Really uplifting. And do you know what? Such little dialogue in the film. Very, very little talking. I also think part of that is because the main character doesn't speak, but
she has to know what she's doing in terms of externalizing things without just saying them.
Yeah.
What I think made that film, there's two things that's quite funny about that film, watching it with you. We both, when that film started and she gets up, boils some eggs and then has a wank in the bath, we were both like, the fuck is this?
Yeah.
We both were. I looked over at you. You were like, you were a bit Marge Simpson with it. The ending, though, the fact that the ending isn't completely explained and it's interpretable is really cool.
Yeah.
I came close to putting that in. The reason I didn't is because I don't know how much rewatch value it's got for me.
I see, for me, I can see quite a lot of rewatch value. So that was my, do I chuck it in the top 10 or not? One, but love that
pretty good
film.
list.
Yeah. So
yours is a bit more all over the shop though, compared to mine. I feel like mine's got a pretty big through line of what I'm into. And I guess because you're into more varied stuff, yours is just a bit more over the place.
Yeah. Yeah. And because I'm also one of those, I clutch onto things. I clutch onto nostalgia quite a bit. So there you go. My Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. If you haven't seen it, you so have to watch it.
I'd rather that wasn't the first recommendation we make on this podcast, if I'm completely honest. Okay, so what's the plan now then? Should we go straight into top 10s?
Let's do top 10s.
You want me to go?
Yeah, go.
All right, so I'll work from 10 to 1. I won't talk too long because a lot of these films have been seen, but I'll just explain why, from my point of view, they make my top 10 favourites. And as you pointed out, favourites, not best films of all time.
Yeah.
Some of these are brilliantly made. But some of it is nostalgia. Some of it is just down to preference. And these are just favorites.
Yeah.
So number 10, and this is a big fucking heaping bowl of nostalgia, is Die Hard with a Vengeance.
Oh, yes.
So pretty much one of the only action films that I really... I don't know. I really find I have a nostalgia for. You talk quite a lot about Schwarzenegger films, and I watched all of the Schwarzenegger films growing up, but I never really cared. I didn't hate them. I didn't like them. I didn't love them. I liked them. They were fine.
Yeah.
But Die Hard with a Vengeance, I don't know why. I think because there's obviously some racial stuff in there, and Jeremy Irons is possibly the most underrated actor of his generation. I just think it has a lot more substance than the average action film. It's slightly killed by its very dated CG stuff going on. There's some water issues. Let's just say that. But Jeremy Irons, I think, is brilliant. I do love the fact that any way Americans can fit a Brit in to be the bad guy, like they did obviously with the original Die Hard, even if they have to tape an accent onto him, is hilarious. But just, Bruce Willis is a great action movie actor. He's not very good in anything else. He's not a good dramatic actor. He's a passable comedic actor in very small doses.
Yeah.
Samuel L. Jackson's obviously Samuel L. Jackson. I think it's his most Samuel L. Jackson movie.
Yeah. Where
he's just lots and lots of catchphrases and lots of anger.
Yeah.
But he's very good in it. It's got a lot of moments that when you really sit down and watch it, I find that you go, oh yeah, do you remember when this happened? Oh, do you remember when that happened? It's actually like, it's got a lot of scenes in it that are forgettable, and not forgettable in a bad way, but you kind of reappreciate it when you come back to it.
Yeah.
I had to put something childhood nostalgia based in here, and when you went the Power Rangers route, I guess I went for a movie that was meant for adults.
Rude.
But yeah, so that's number 10, Die Hard with a Vengeance. And for the sake of anyone's interest, Die Hard 1 we watched at cinema a few months back.
Yeah.
And not as good. Number 3 is definitely the best one. Die Hard with a Vengeance is definitely the best one. I'm not a fan in any way, shape or form of number 2. I just find it boring.
Number 2 is boring.
Number 4 is hilarious, and I won't watch number 5. So watch number 3, potentially
Then
watch number 1, because number 1 has reference to number 3, and then after that, whatever you want. So number 9, not Die Hard 9. Number 9 on my top 10 list is The Dark Knight.
Oh.
Now, I remember a couple of things about when we went to see this. We went with your brother.
God, I don't
we
even
went to the
remember.
cinema with your brother to see this, and I was not impressed about being dragged to watch a comic book movie.
I remember that, yeah.
I had watched the Batman Begins. I'd watched Batman Begins with some friends at the cinema, and I was bored out of my mind. It's a good movie. It's got a lot of good acting in it. It's a comic book movie, so I think I went in with a real desire to not pay attention and be a bit bored, and I was bored.
Yeah.
I've since watched that again, and I don't think it's as good as what it's made out to be. I think Liam Neeson is pretty bad in it.
The thing is, as well, I think is then when you watch The Dark Knight,
there's a jump.
Oh, such a jump. So
The Dark Knight, I think, again, if you just take it as a film, it stands on its own. It's brilliant. Christian Bale, it's hard to tell if he's over or underrated, but he's brilliant. It has so many brilliant performances peppered throughout that people get kind of nostalgic just for Heath Ledger, who was obviously amazing. The scene where he makes the pencil disappear was the scene that drew me in. That was the moment when I was like, okay, I'm all in on this film. I'm gonna enjoy this. I do remember moaning before the start of the film that I didn't want to watch it. So it didn't take particularly long for me to be right in there. It's one of only 2 comic book movies I think are good movies. Other comic book movies are fandom feet ticklers. They're not real art. And I actually agree with Scorsese's "it's not cinema" reference to comic book films, because like a load of pretty people standing in front of a green screen while someone overlays a computer game in front of them, to me, isn't interesting. And I'm not someone that sits there just fapping at the idea that, oh, I remember reading about that thing and now here it is in the movie. Oh, I read that comic. It's just not my thing. I don't think you should sit there ever with a movie with a checklist and go, okay, well, it had this, and it had this, therefore I liked it.
Yeah.
It's like, well, did you actually like it? You know, if you have to sit there and say, oh, well, it had the after credit sequence where they brought up the guy, and I just don't find like the Avengers films to me. I've tried. Lord knows I've tried. I watched the Avengers in one go, which was hard work because that is just a lot of nonsense. And I tried to watch the Captain America movies. I watched the first one and was very bored.
Did you end up watching the whole thing?
Yes, and I watched about 9 minutes of the second one and gave up.
So you did a lot more. You got a lot further than I did, because I did the first 45 minutes of Captain America, wanted to bash my brains in.
Yeah, it took 3 goes. To be fair, it took me 3 goes, but I did get there. But it's I don't think, to be honest with you, and God knows I'm going to get my ass kicked for this, but Chris Evans is just not a particularly enthralling actor.
To me, he's very cardboard.
He's always the same guy. His character in Not Another Teen Movie is literally his character, but toned down in every other film. You know, when he was the Human Torch.
Yeah, in the Fantastic Four.
Yeah. He's always been the same thing. So whatever, I'm not going to go into it because I'm going to end up getting, murdered by some geek with an ill-fitting t-shirt and a shield. But I think it reduces decent actors to being shit. I think like Samuel L. Jackson is just a bunch of nothing in it. I think that Robert Downey Jr. is a bunch of nothing in it. And then when you think that they're trying to put, Robert Downey Jr. on the same level as Hemsworth, and Hemsworth is a male model.
Yeah.
It's just a bit whatever. Anyway, talking about things I like. The Dark Knight is one of 2 comic book movies that I think are just good movies in their own right. I think close is Iron Man. But I enjoyed that more than I expected to. I didn't enjoy it.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way. If it didn't have Robert Downey Jr. in it, would it be a good movie? No. So, Dark Knight, obviously Christopher Nolan's an absolute master of what he does, and I'm sure he's quite polarizing, which is usually the sign of someone doing something right. If everybody likes what you're doing, it's probably vanilla.
Yeah.
Let's move on. Probably the most recent film I've watched to make this list, and I thought it would be higher until I started to assemble what I had, is Spotlight. I don't really need to go into it. It's a brilliant film. It's worth watching. There's a whole bunch of great performances in there. Everybody in there is brilliant, with the exception of Ruffalo, who's a little bit over the top, but he was one of the most celebrated people for being in it.
Yeah.
I found him to be a bit Rain Man in it, but not in a good way. Like, he was in some parts, it was just inconsistent, his performance. In some parts, he almost seemed to be trying to portray someone with like autism.
Yeah.
And in other parts, not. It was a bit inconsistent. Wasn't really sure what he was going for. And maybe the person he was portraying, he's done an excellent job of portraying that person, but it was the only part of the movie that kept dragging me out. It's a beautiful story in a really rough way, because it shows progression in humanity as in a sort of macro way. But just brilliant performances. And obviously Batman, Mr. Keaton, is finally getting the appreciation he deserves as an actor, I think, in the last 10 years. And it seems ridiculous that he had to wait that long to come back into the spotlight.
Very well done.
Number 7, the emotional film that kicked my ass that you wouldn't watch because you don't like these kind of films. This film sat in our Blu-ray collection for a couple years and had been around for a long time. I knew it was going to absolutely batter me. A Ghost Story. It's incredibly raw. It's hard not to get emotional talking about the performances in that film. Casey Affleck, who I'm not a fan of as a person, but he's fantastic in the short space that he's in it. For the life of me, I cannot remember the actress's name. So what I'm going to do is you're going to quickly find that, and I'm going to... Rooney Mara. Rooney Mara is incredible as an actress can be, portraying numbness. There is something... I'm getting like goosebumps now with... There's a scene where she eats a pie and it lasts minutes and there is no dialogue. There is no monologue. I don't think there's even a soundtrack. I think it's literally... In fact, I know there isn't a soundtrack. There is no music underneath it. It is diegetic sounds of a very sad, numb person eating a pie. And it is a masterclass in emotional acting. You go through about 5 emotions watching someone eat a pie. I cannot explain it. It's something you have to watch. And there are going to be the majority of people, I imagine, who will think I'm being a sanctimonious dick for thinking it's that deep, but it is.
Yeah.
And if you watch it with no cynicism and you watch it and you open up to that film, it's brilliant. It's an art film. It goes in a couple of weird directions, which definitely caught me out, but in a good way. And the ending... I just sat there for, I don't know, an hour and went between like crying and not really knowing what it even... I felt like I grew as a person from watching that movie. It's incredible. And I'm glad I waited as long as I did to watch it, because I think if I'd have watched it the moment I had the opportunity, I wouldn't have built it up as much. And you know that thing where you build something up in your mind and then you watch it and it's a disappointment?
Yeah.
That's always horrible. That's always like an absolute kick in the shin.
Yeah.
But when you build something up and then you watch it and it's better, there's nothing like that. That is just such a cool feeling. Absolutely amazing film. And I think anyone that's not a complete fucking robot should watch it, open up to it, watch it on your own so that you're not feeling like you have to put on a front for other people. And I know there's a film in your top 10 that's going to be like that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that like it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And it's a masterclass in emotive cinema.
Yeah.
And you saw the state of me after I watched it.
Yeah. And it kind of made me not want to watch that film even more.
And the ending is just, even if I've already said that, I'm going to say it again, the ending is just amazing.
Yeah.
This one's going to get contentious now. So we have just spent a month apart thanks to the coronavirus and you being the hero that you are and going in quarantining yourself with elderly residents of your care home so that you can provide care much at risk to yourself, where other people might have buried themselves in admin or whatever. You stepped up with a fantastic team of people and we were apart for a month. And in that time, I watched a lot of films to fight the boredom / worry, depending on the day.
Yeah.
And one of these films I've put off for the longest time because you know one thing about me is I hate hype.
You hate it.
I hate hype. I still haven't watched Avatar. Will never watch it. A, not my kind of film. B, Dances with Wolves done with bad CGI isn't going to get me excited. And C, if you keep telling me something is the best thing ever, I'm going to not watch it to spite you.
Yeah, it's that teenage rebellion thing.
Yeah,
isn't it?
Yeah. And I also think as well is like if people build up your expectations and then it disappoints, that's even worse than you building them up.
Yeah.
But I've watched a lot of horror.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know where I'm going with this?
Yeah, I think I do now. Yeah.
I've watched a lot of horror, a lot of horror. I feel like between me and you, we watched more horror than probably anybody else, bar nutcases that don't have jobs.
Yes, I would agree.
Because we've watched a lot of terrible horror, very low horror, not particularly famous horror. You know, we've covered the full gamut of horror shite as well as the good stuff. I think the best horror film I've ever seen, it's not my favorite, which is a weird contradiction, but the best horror film I've ever seen is Hereditary.
Such a good film.
Such a good film.
Yeah.
And closely linked to Midsommar, because I actually think Midsommar is the sequel, which a lot of people might not agree with, but I think that I have my reasons, but we'll talk about that in a future video. Toni Collette is by far the best actress in the world. By far.
She is incredible.
It's not close.
Yeah.
And by definition, therefore, the most underappreciated actress in the world. And when I say actress, I'm not saying that she's the best woman and the men are all better or anything like that. She's probably in the conversation with like Daniel Day-Lewis and, you know, maybe 2 or 3 others to even be the best actor, full stop, in the world. She is incredible in it. The volatile emotion that she can produce and the way she makes you feel about what in some cases in that movie are quite funny things or dark humored things or surreal things. She's just incredible. And to have an actress or an actor, I hate the expression actress.
I just say actor to refer to everyone.
To have an actor in a horror film produce a performance like that is so rare. Because nobody takes horror seriously. And there was a film going back a while, which was Mother, where everyone filleted themselves about Jennifer Lawrence. Toni Collette wipes the absolute floor with Jennifer Lawrence. This is unbelievable how good this was. I watched this at like 11 in the morning as part of like a huge run of films that I watched over like 3 days. And this was the only one where I felt like I needed to take a break. It's emotional. Horror is about dread. It's not about scares. I hate when people say, I didn't like such and such film, it wasn't scary. Well, that's subjective, but dread isn't. Yeah. Having the dread of that moment where, and I can't spoil the film, so it's really hard to do this, but the inevitable emotional reaction is coming. But there's nothing characters can do about it. They have to wait, and they know they are going to have to swim through the hell that is awaiting them from people that they love. Yeah. It's otherworldly. It's incredible. And the storyline is, like most great movies, metaphorical. It's not literal. And it really frustrates me when people talk about horror films or any film as if everything is just literal. It's metaphorical. Yeah. We definitely differ on Midsommar, and I can't wait for us to do that episode.
Yeah.
So that takes me up to my top 5. So I've got 5 left. Would you like me to stop now and you do your 10 through 6?
Oh, yeah. Go on then.
After you.
Then. Okay. I'm going to reiterate the fact that these are my favourites and not best films ever made.
Lord help us.
I know there's at least one in there someone will get the arse ache over, but I don't care. Okay, so number 10 is John Wick. The first John Wick. Again, love Keanu Reeves. It is such a good action film. It has some amazing fight scenes in it. It's such a good revenge film, and it's such a good passionate film about fighting for something that you love. Obviously, the scene at the beginning was very sad for me, but I can wipe that over because of the rest of the film.
I actually feel like this is one that you can spoil. The dog dies.
The dog dies, you
and
fucking
if you
bastards.
don't like dogs dying, it's a hard scene to get through.
Oh, it's hard, especially as Chica was sat there with me and I was like, oh, baby, come here. But from that point, but I don't watch films that have dogs dying in them, sorry, because I just don't. I Am Legend can go screw itself really hard. But with John Wick, you need that very few moments to have the rest of the film.
I don't think I've ever heard someone fail at English so much in the space of one sentence. Do you want to try that again? Okay, you don't watch films that have dogs die.
I don't normally watch films that have dogs die in them because I find them too sad. But with John Wick, you need to be able to see and feel those moments where the dog dies in this film in order to really understand the rest of the film.
Yeah.
Such a good action film. I love the fight sequences. I love how they were all choreographed. I love that every gun fired and every bullet hit something. You know, there's a reason for it. Every movement is so well made. Absolutely loved it. It's such an exciting film. So that is number 10 on my list.
Pretty good.
Number 9 is Expendables 2. I know some people are not going to agree with me, but it comes from my obsession of action movies, watching them as a kid with my parents. You've got Stallone, you've got Schwarzenegger, you've got Bruce Willis, you've got Chuck Norris. And then to bring in Statham as well, who is such a good action star, but obviously not from the 90s genre of action movies.
Yeah.
It was everything that every action movie fan from the 90s wanted. We wanted to see all of these guys together.
Yep.
And we finally got it. And I think you referred to me as a giddy 12-year-old boy eating chocolate when I was watching this film, because it had everything in it. I loved the cheese. I loved that they switched their catchphrases.
It was fan service.
Oh my God, such a good film. And then you add in Jean-Claude Van Damme, which was one of my mum's all-time favorites. Just such a good film, exciting from the beginning right the way through to the end. And all action movies need to have comedy in them as well. And it just, for me, placed it perfectly. So yeah, just a fan-loving film, that one. Number 8 was Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. And I love this film because...
Hang on. Let's just take a moment.
Yeah.
We went to see that for me, right?
Yeah.
And I went back and watched it without you, I think twice.
Yes.
Isn't it weird that makes your top 10 but not mine?
It is, isn't it? See, yeah.
It's very strange.
It is. It's weird, isn't it? What I love about this, and you touched on this earlier, is I love the era that it's set in. I love its simplicity. The colour grading of the film is beautiful. And I love that there was no mobile phones. I love that there was no internet. I love that, the kids who are desperately trying to find their friends are doing so through walkie-talkies.
Yeah.
And running home to dial a phone to try and get hold of their friend, and likelihood is they'll catch up with their mum instead. I absolutely love that you just don't know who is where and why they are. And I think it adds to that fear. Like you were saying, horror movies are about dread.
Yeah.
And the scenes in those films, those children are genuinely feeling dread because there is no other way of contacting anyone.
But it's also fun, right?
And it's fun. It, like you said, it's the Are You Afraid of the Darks? It's the Goosebumps. It was a bit of nostalgia. It's such a good film. I loved it. So that's why it's number 8 in my.
Well, there's a video about it by Ryan Hollinger, who's generally pretty on the nose with. He's pretty accurate with his reviews of horror. He's one of the only people that reviews horror in a kind of adult way, as in like not like a child. But his review of Scary Stories Till in the Dark is bordering narcissism.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The only reason that you like it is because you are an idiot and it's fan service. And you are defending something that you know is terrible. It's like, no, mate, people just have a difference of opinion to you.
Yeah.
And you feel the need to qualify your opinion as being better than someone else's.
Yeah.
Frustrates me. It seems to be a film that suffered from that.
Yeah, which is a shame because I think that a lot of people would probably really enjoy that film.
Yeah.
They would just enjoy it because it's a really good film. So, watch it, definitely. Okay, so then we're up to number 7. And number 7 is Haunted House by the Wayans brothers. Because what a fucking funny film that is. I absolutely love that film. Every single line from that film, I think, is a part of our day-to-day lives and our day-to-day conversations with each other about, windows being closed and other kinds of things. And
yes, Ray, ghost.
Been trying to tell you for 15 minutes. The Wayans brothers, they are genius. When they did Scary Movie 1 and Scary Movie 2, their genius is just outstanding. They know how to take the genre of films that they're looking at, which for both of those two have been horror movies.
Yeah. But different eras. Different
eras of horror movies. They nailed every single scene.
Yeah.
The whole, just incredible. Yeah. I just love
Adrian
it.
Crockett's hilarious in it as Ray.
Oh my God. He's one of my favorite character. Absolutely love him. So it's such a good film. And it's one of those that you can watch over and over again. You can have it on in the background. Obviously, the through scenes with Haunted House and Haunted House 2 with his duck is just hilarious.
With his duck?
Yeah. When he's in bed with the duck.
Oh God, yeah. He's like his cuddly toys.
Yeah, with a little bit of Another Level playing in the background,
Yeah, I forgot about the duck.
It's all nostalgia, It's so well made and
My dog is a fucking pancake.
Possessed. After possession, it's already possessed. And then he flings the board.
Yeah,
it's so funny. I don't think you can watch that film and not find it funny. I don't think you can watch it and not appreciate its genius.
It's silly genius.
Yeah.
It's not like
it's not like genius.
Incredibly satirical and amazing at social commentary. It's fucking funny.
Yeah.
And I don't like comedies, but it is fucking funny.
It's so good. So I that's a toughie of where to put it in my top 10 list, but it's there. So
I think as well, though, it helps that you're a fan of horror because you understand the source material that it's making fun of. Like, it's okay to say, like, Scary Movie was obviously parodying things like Scream, I Know What You Did Last Summer, and so on, which at the time were big. Like, everybody was watching those films when we were that age.
Yeah.
But now, Haunted House mocks Paranormal Activity, Insidious, Sinister, and Annabelle.
Yeah.
And those films aren't as popular now as what like Scream was back in the Scary Movie days. So I think it does help if you are a bit of a horror fan that you get the references.
Yeah.
And
you can really appreciate it. And it's also one of those films where it does, it brings in race into it as well, but in a very comedic way, and it's them bringing it into it, which I also think is really cool. And it's just really funny.
Yeah.
They don't take anything too seriously, but they know how to make a really good parody film. So yeah, to me, genius is in that particular genre. And then we'll go down to 6, which is the 1978 version of Halloween.
Wow, it's not even in your top 5.
Oh, it was a real toughie. Because it's one of my all-time favorite horror movies. Simply, the reason why I love Halloween is really because it birthed everything about horror that I love.
Mm-hmm.
Without that Halloween, we wouldn't have some of the other things on my list or some of the other things that we've been able to watch.
Well, what I'll say is we both know that's coming up in my list. So why don't we just hold that for now and we'll both talk about that when I get to it.
Oh, okay, I love it. So that was 6.
And with that, we reached number 5 for both of us. So I guess I take over.
Yeah, go.
Okay, so number 5 is probably the film I've watched the most ever by a few hundred times, I'd imagine. We actually went through a phase in our relationship of about 6 months of watching this at least twice a week. So Scream.
Wow.
Yep.
Number 5 on your list.
Well, Halloween's number 6 on yours. Don't throw stones.
Oh no, I'm just, we're shooketh at both.
Yeah. So the reason that I love Scream is it's just era defining horror. It's the reason that I really fell in love with horror. It shows that horror can laugh at itself. It is aware. It's sort of self-aware, which has become a little bit too self-aware, I think, lately. But it's an incredibly meta film. It's great at sort of commentating on It's great at commentating on where horror falls down, and that self-reference, but still with a coherent storyline, still with almost a nostalgic reference to old rom-coms.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very layered film. I think the more you watch it, the more you appreciate it. Yeah. I don't think there's many horror films that are like that. I think there are lots of horror films that you can watch over and over and enjoy, but maybe you don't learn anything new. You don't learn any more of the sort of character arcs, or you don't find more layers to it. Whereas Scream is one that you do. It's hard to pick because I actually really like the first 3. I like the original trilogy. I think that I can find a problem with the second and third a lot quicker than I can find with the first.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why the Scream, the original, makes it in. The reason it falls to number 5 as opposed to being number 1, considering I've watched it the most, is that I don't feel, beyond nostalgia and just that endorphin level enjoyment of it, I don't feel there's a lot of emotional connection to it. I don't think it's a particularly emotional film.
Mm-hmm.
So it's layered, but it's not particularly deep. It's just an all-time classic. It's got the wonderful soundtrack. It's got some hilariously bad acting, some hilariously good acting. It's got Wes Craven dressed up as Freddy Krueger. What more could you really ask for as a horror fan? And I think that it's been imitated so much, even in films that aren't the same tone, but things have been stolen in terms of the self-referential nature of it. And the fact that it's a horror film that's looking at horror films.
Yeah.
I just think it's brilliant in what it is. Number 4, and this one was, I want this to be higher, but it can't be.
Okay.
Because of what's above it. The highest I can put a Fincher film, and that's Zodiac. It's a Fincher film, so it's an absolute masterclass in attention to detail. Nothing is superfluous. It's not fluffed up. It's not made to be excessively long or excessively weighty for the sake of it.
Mm-hmm.
Everything that's in there serves a purpose. The thing that I love about Fincher is that he doesn't constantly shake the camera. He doesn't do unnecessary close-ups, and it's not, especially dialogue scenes, it's not ridiculous coverage. There is a reason for moving or migrating the coverage of the actors within a dialogue scene where it shows, usually if he has three people talking to each other, he shoots it as three lots of two people talking to each other.
Yeah.
And one is almost always excluded until they're needed for the culmination of what's going on. He has incredible visual literacy. The attention to detail is fantastic. It's a retro film in the way that it's set. I hate mobile phones in films. I hate new cars in films. So
Yeah.
it sounds like a ridiculous thing to be bothered by, but it's something that always bumps up a film in my estimation. It's just brilliant. The performances, Jake Gyllenhaal is amazing. Ruffalo is amazing. Robert Downey Jr. is amazing. There isn't a bad performance in the film. And it's also an era that I'm fascinated by. It's a case that I'm fascinated by. And
I think that's part of what it is. I think it sucks you in because originally it's the story,
absolutely.
you know, and still the who was it is still fascinating to
That's
people.
the best part, is the fact that there isn't an ending.
Yeah, there's no resolution, so to speak, you know, and that's enticing. And the way he's written that and the way that film's been developed for that story was, incredible.
Yeah. And sort of approaching it from the media's point of view is fascinating because it's almost definitely a he. He's a guy, the Zodiac was a guy that was desperate for media attention. So you could approach it from the victim's point of view. But I think that the victims with the Zodiac, not to go on the whole thing here, but I think the victims with Zodiac weren't important to what he was doing, to him. I don't mean to me, or they shouldn't be to anyone else. But I think to the Zodiac, they were a means to generate that media attention, to generate that fear, to generate that attention towards himself. So to approach it from the victim's point of view would kind of miss the point. I think to approach it from the police's point of view would kind of miss the point, although they do reference it. Really, to approach it from the media's point of view was the most fascinating. And there's some really fantastic tense scenes in there where even though you know the current state of that case, you're still very tense about certain things that go on during that film. I think it's probably his most underrated movie. I'd love to see him do some more stuff like it. You know, obviously with Mindhunters, it's an opportunity to see it done on a very broad scale. I would love to see him pick out Berkowitz or or Manson and do a feature film on that particular subject, and maybe not the full scope of what they did, but focusing on one element. Yeah. Because his aesthetics and his attention to detail and his metaphor and his visual literacy and his social commentary is just so fascinating to me. And unlike a lot of technical filmmakers, I actually feel like he cares about the emotion of what he's creating. He wants there to be an emotional connection to characters. A lot of technical directors or any technical creative person, usually guys, because they're focused on technical things as opposed to the people involved, they sometimes lose that emotional connection, which devalues the art. And Fincher doesn't do that. He's a legend. I wish I could put him at number one, but I can't. So we're now at my top three. And I think you could probably work out the three from the fact that they've not been mentioned yet, but the order might be slightly unusual. Yeah. I don't think so. So number three, and it's an opportunity for us to now finally talk about this, is Halloween. 1978 Halloween, Jamie Lee Curtis,
John Carpenter.
just nostalgia, and to be honest with you, given the budget and the constraints and the actual skill of the people available, no offense intended, an absolute masterclass in what can be done. I'm going to start that one again. An absolute demonstration in what can be done by people that have a good idea, are creative with that idea, and work hard.
Yeah.
And it's a very less is more film because it builds. One of the things I do really dislike about modern horror is they really front load what they think is the important stuff. And then the rest of it's like, get the fucking plot out of the way and then we'll do scary stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is not what was done in Halloween. It was building to a crescendo the night of Halloween. That's what made it so great, was that there was a build. It wasn't just someone blamming all over the place from the outset and then you get, cheap jump scares and nothing. It also features one of my all-time favorite shots ever in a movie, which is him slowly appearing in the light in the doorway.
Oh, so good.
Behind Jamie Lee Curtis. It is one of those scenes that every single time if I'm with you, I'll overdo it and I'll be way too happy about it. But if I'm on my own, I still just stop what I'm doing and I smile and I think that was fucking cool.
It's so good. Yeah.
It's fucking cool.
You see, my most favorite scene from that film is the washing line scene, because it is so simple and it's so fucking creepy, because Maya's character, the mask, is emotionless. There is nothing there with the pure black eyes. It's just dread and fear. And because it's just a standard boiler suit.
No, you're exactly right. The character design of Michael Myers is probably the best part, in the fact that it's simplistic. It's not over the top. It's exactly what you see in your head when you're scared of someone. There's features, but there's not. It's distinguishable, but it's not.
Yeah.
That's what makes it so fantastic.
Yeah. Even like down to his walk, and even when he's driving the car, it's eerie and it's creepy, and you just don't know what he's going to do. And
there's a subtlety to it. The scene where they're investigating the break-in at the costume shop, at the shop where he gets his mask and the knife from, and you actually see him drive through the background. It's not like, if that was done today, there would be 15 cuts showing him look at them, showing the car. It would just be so overdone. Whereas this, because they were restricted, and restriction creates creativity.
Yeah.
When you have if you watch a lot of modern films, they have too many options and they use all of them.
Yeah.
Sometimes you need a less is more approach, and that film has it. The opening scene, the oneer at the beginning of that film, the walk through, the POV shot is groundbreaking. And it maybe not in general film terms, but in the sense of a horror film, it is groundbreaking. It especially if you ever have the opportunity to go and find out how they did it. And the fact that it was an abandoned house and they had to move stuff and move lights as the camera was moving around. Groundbreaking.
Yeah. But it is the birth of all great horror, what we know now. It is the birth of some of the best horror movies ever made, my most favourite horror movies ever made.
And some terrible ones.
But it's just epic in every way.
So now top 2.
Ooh.
This is really hard because these interchanged.
Okay.
Very, very briefly. So do I do 2 or do I do 1?
No, do 2.
Okay, so
do 2.
Number 2 is a recent watch, watched on my own at the cinema, and it amazed me. Technically, it's incredible. It's hard to even put into words what it is. Having some family history with war means that I guess I visualize those family members in these situations and how scary it must have been. It's 1917, just for the sake of ending the tension. But yeah, it did a couple of things for me right off the bat. Firstly, it's a good film without the gimmick.
Yeah.
Like the gimmick of it being like a continuous take, or the illusion of it being a continuous take. It doesn't need it. That's not you. It's not icing with no cake. It's a lot of cake and that's a fantastic bit of icing to go on top.
Yeah.
It's a really simple story told very complexly, which is what it needed. It needed that complexity to get home to the viewer the transition of emotion and the transition of priorities from what you think is the main character to the main character, the change in scenery, the lighting, the progression of the determination of the main character is really fantastic. The other thing it did was it wasn't a war film where everyone was 40, which has always made war films worthless to me.
Yeah.
Because it's just not true. You know, everyone that's going over into no man's land and getting shot and the millions of lives that have been lost, so many of them were kids.
Yeah.
You know, they were barely old enough to know their ass from their elbow.
And so many of them much younger than they were supposed to be for conscription.
Yes.
They lied about their ages. So it's such a pivotal point.
Exactly. And these are boys. They're not men. Not to diminish what they did. In fact, to heighten what they did. They were boys doing a man's job, defending a nation or defending a cause. And it shows the desperation of war. It shows the lack of humanity in one particular pivotal scene. It shows a great degree of humanity in another scene that involves milk. It has everything that you could put into a war film without the usual bollocks. And I never thought I would like a war film, let alone absolutely love one. And I walked out of the cinema. I cried in the film because I thought it was such a brilliant story, such a wonderful progression, so well portrayed. And I remember the scene with the soldier falling in the water and where the water takes him. That doesn't spoil anything. That's just something that happens. I remember watching that and just thinking, fuck, I need a break. Like, I cannot emotionally keep up with how enthralling this is and how amazing this is. It's almost the I don't like the word, but like the gimmick of it being a continuous take almost worked against it for me at that point. Because I just needed a break. I needed to be able to kind of collect myself and then enjoy the rest of it. But I wouldn't change a single thing about it. I can't think of a single thing that I think it did wrong. I wouldn't change a single character. I wouldn't change an actor that was in it. I wouldn't change a shot. And I know that sounds like an arrogant thing to say, like, oh, it's up to my standards. But when you think that someone else is making a film or a massive collection of people are making a film, and they don't even know you exist, and they manage to make something that you can't even find a single fault in on your own preference, that's an incredible achievement.
Yeah, definitely.
And I agree with your point earlier that it's not fucking muddy, which most war films are, because they're trying to get across that gritty feel. But most of the time you're just going, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah. Whereas I think actually it was much more realistic because it wasn't those two wars and, you know, the First World War, which that film is based on, it wasn't solely set only in the winter months in Europe. It was, 12 months out of the year for the entirety that it was going. So there are going to be months where the sun was beaming and flowers were blossoming and trees were full, So I think that it did a fantastic job of actually truly representing to the best of its ability what it was actually like.
The way as well that they brought the environment in to match emotion didn't feel forced. It felt diegetic. It felt like it was meant to be there, and it was almost the universe. It's almost as if you're watching a real life event and it's just the universe kind of highlighting certain transitions.
Yeah.
It didn't feel forced to me. And I'm aware that there are going to be people that hated it. I actually recently spoke to someone that thought it was boring and poor. And I got to be honest with you, I've never lost respect for someone so quickly. They're entitled to that opinion, but I'm entitled to lose all respect for them.
Yeah.
But yeah, Deakins is a he's a treasure. He's genuinely a treasure. Mendes is a treasure. I think it's just, I would say this is what I'll end on. Number 1 is my favorite film. That's the best film I've ever seen. So 1917 is the best, but the incredibly unexciting moment for you, but for anyone else listening that doesn't know, my favorite film is The Revenant. Yeah. And I actually had to go back and watch it again after watching 1917 to get myself in order.
Oh, bless you.
And work out which one I liked more. Not which one I thought was better, because I think that's fodder for people who are more penis sized than they are personality, but it's which one spoke more to me, which one I enjoyed more, and which one resonated with me more. And The Revenant, it's close, but it's not close. I can never say this guy's name, but Emmanuel Lubezki, it's probably wrong, who's the director of photography, has created a movie where every single frame is better than any photo I could ever take. If I was to try for the rest of my life, I genuinely think every single scene in that movie looks better than I could ever hope to take a single photograph. And when you consider the motion and the fact that it's natural light and you've got 1,000,001 variables, to be able to pull that off is insane. I studied the history of America at school, and probably one of my favorite subjects ever when it comes to the colonization of North America and, you know, the indigenous people versus the colonizers and just the general formation of what is now the United States of America is a really interesting subject. I know most people probably aren't here to listen to me talk about history, but if you do ever get the chance to watch documentaries on it that aren't hyped up bullshit, watch some factual ones where it gives both sides accounts. And I'm not saying that to say that one side wasn't horribly massacred, but there is this weird idea that the second people stepped on land in America, they were American. Yeah. They were Dutch, they were French, they were Spanish, they were English. Yeah. This wasn't Americans versus Native Americans. This was Europeans versus Native Americans. And it's fascinating to see the environment almost kill the Europeans, but the Europeans kill the environment.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating subject in general. Obviously, DiCaprio wins his much belated Oscar. He should have had one probably 3 or 4 films back.
Yeah.
And this was one that he should have gotten as well. Tom Hardy is probably the perfect antagonist.
He's so good in this film.
And one of the things that I've heard about this is that the people who didn't like Tom Hardy because he mumbles, which, I don't want to throw stones here, but fuck off. It's a simple story told complexly, and that's usually what I go for. I don't like something that has 300 twists and turns and 89 characters that have all got some elaborate backstory and it needs 11 films to tell it. That's dumb. That's, to me, is just complicated for the sake of complicated. And if you can't produce that in a way that keeps me connected, that's on you, not on me. My job is not to have to work to enjoy something. There are obvious problems that people have with The Revenant being simple. They think it's boring. And I had this conversation with you about Midsommar, but to keep it on track with Revenant, bullet point what happens in Revenant and then tell me it's boring. Just because you can't stay focused, and maybe I'm being contradictory here by saying that, I'm not to blame for not following a story, but then I'm telling other people they are for not following a story. I think in this case, it's such a simple story and it's a character basing. It's about the progression of the character and understanding what they were going through and how hard it was to live then to just survive. I think if you think this film is boring, I imagine you're probably not the most complex human being.
Yeah. You probably You probably just put it on and watched it because you got told, "Oh, Revenant, DiCaprio's in it."
Yeah, and you talk
imagine.
through like half of it and then can't work out what the fuss was
Yeah,
about.
and you didn't really get it.
Tom Hardy, like I say, is absolutely brilliant. The perfect antagonist. The amazing depiction of cowardice and malice. The way that those are combined, that's a hard pairing to get right, and he is phenomenal at it. It's emotional. It's
also kind of human beings at their rawest.
Yes.
That's the right phrase to use, but they are so raw in that film, you know, down to the bare essentials of just how they're living life and how they're taking each day, and down to the bare emotions and how difficult loss is, and how difficult it is to succeed at something. You know, there are thousands of layers to that film.
Yeah, like I say, I think it's just people they read the back or they read the Netflix blurb, and then that's what the film's about. So they'll just pick up the key points while they're flicking on their phone or something.
Yeah.
What's a really weird thing about this, and you already know this, but I think it's quite fascinating. The first time I watched this was on a plane.
Yeah, you did. You watched it on a tiny screen.
On a tiny screen on a plane. I think we were going to Vegas, but I can't remember. And even then, on that tiny screen, I remember sitting forwards. If the guy in front had moved his seat back, he'd have given me a concussion because I was glued to that screen. And I remember stopping it about 3 times and saying to you, this might be the best film I've ever seen.
Yeah, you did. Yeah. And you were very emotional when you said that as well.
Yeah, like this is resonating with me on this shit screen on a noisy plane where I'm thinking more about, I'm thinking more about the holiday than I'm thinking about the film that I'm watching. But yeah, no, it's to me, it's my favorite film of all time. And last week I watched it again with the view that this was probably going to be a thing that we do soon. We start this podcast, and yeah, I'm set. I think it's going to take a hell of a film to knock that off the top spot.
Yeah, I think it will. For a very long time as well. It's definitely going to be there.
So that's me done. Now it's just you.
Now it's just me.
The main event.
The main event. So again, my list has been very much all over the place and very, very different to yours.
Right.
So number 5, this is a film you haven't seen yet, and I really can't wait until you see it, to be honest with you, is The Peanut Butter Falcon.
Right.
With Shia LaBeouf in. This film, in all honesty, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's not higher up in my list, but it's just because of the other films I've got there. But this film didn't leave my mind for weeks after I saw it the first time. It just stuck with me. And it was a film that at the very end, I absolutely bawled my eyes out, and I came into you sobbing.
Interrupted what I was doing, yes.
Yeah, to sob and get a cuddle. But I need to point out that I wasn't crying because I was sad. I was crying because I was so happy. This is such an uplifting film. It is such a positive film. And I put this film on your recommendation, not really thinking that it was going to be much, to be honest with you. And it completely blew my mind. It is a fascinating story. And I think as well, because I work in the industry, it's a fascinating story on
the industry of care.
Yeah, which is what I was, going to say. So, because in the care industry, there are 2 types. There is institutionalized care, and then there is non-institutionalized care. And in the Western world, we have tried to move away from institutionalized care, but there are certain parts, and particularly in America, that are still very much institutionalized. And the themes around care and how they take care of vulnerable people is fascinating, and it moves you. And in the beginning of the film made me sad, and also more than anything made me very angry. And I became very attached to the main characters so quickly. Shia LaBeouf, I know people have their thoughts about Shia LaBeouf, but please put all of that aside and put aside, his Transformers films and all of that other stuff. He is absolutely fantastic in this film. Just truly incredible. He is what every human being should understand somebody with mental health disorders, with learning disabilities, somebody who's vulnerable. He is everything that you should aspire to be. You should see the person as they are, not the label that they've been given. And because the film is about Shia LaBeouf's character meeting someone with Down syndrome, it's not about meeting somebody with Down syndrome. It's about meeting a person and becoming friends.
Yeah.
And I don't know what else to say. It's just such a beautiful film. And I just think that you should watch it. It's so powerful that I now use it in training for my staff, because it's to make people realize that, you know, this kind of institutional abuse still goes on, but how important it is that we look at people for who they are and what they do and how much fun they can have, you know. And the title of the film itself, Peanut Butter Falcon, it doesn't mean peanut butter falcon. It literally means going for what you want and trying to achieve what you want, regardless of your limitations. You know, you should always try.
Yeah.
You know, I think how you've said when you've come out of other films like with 1917 and with A Ghost Story, and you just felt so moved by it.
Yep.
That is exactly how this film makes me feel.
I think it's your misconception of A Ghost Story. You think that I was upset and sad, but you're moved. I think you learn something about yourself as much as you learn what they wanted you to get from the story. I think you learn about yourself from watching films like that. A Ghost Story is very similar in the way you describe your experience is the way that I felt with mine.
Yeah.
It's a film. It's going to take me a long time to get to Peanut Butter Falcon because it's going to be a long time for me to get to Peanut Butter Falcon because it's an emotional one, and I tend to like to space those out by quite a distance.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with you. And that one I subsequently saw again within a couple of weeks because I put it on at work for some staff, and exactly who I knew would get it, got it straight away because they were sat there bawling their eyes out, you know, and then talking about it, it's such an amazing film. And I really want everyone to be able to see it and to appreciate what an incredible film it is. Not to mention that it's a lot of fun and it's funny, you know, so it's got all those other great elements in it as well. So yeah, it's not higher up on my list, but I think, you know, it maybe one day will, but there's just some other films in there that have been with me for a much longer period of time. So that was number 5. So number 4 is The Other Guys. I was never much of a Will Ferrell fan. I was never much of a Will Ferrell fan until you and I got together.
Well, he wasn't around before then, really, other than SNL, which we don't get in England.
Yeah, but
even the early stages of our relationship, you weren't a fan. I think the first time I got you to go to a cinema and watch one of his films was Talladega Nights, and you slept through it. Yeah.
But I was never really, you were more into him than I was. You know, you're more aware of him than what I was.
Yeah.
But I don't think I ever would have paid much attention to him had it not been for you. Is what I'm getting at, you know?
Yeah, I think Will Ferrell holds a lot for 18, 19-year-old boys.
Yeah.
He makes immature male minds laugh a lot.
Yeah. And what I loved about The Other Guys was, again, it's an action comedy. So it's kind of the things that I love. It has some great actors in it. I mean, and it's narrated by Ice-T, for God's sake. I mean, what's not to love about a film being narrated by Ice-T? Some of my most favourite lines are in there. My Plain Wife is just one of my most favourites.
The jokes about Eva Mendes are fantastic.
Yeah, and I'm not a fan of Eva Mendes. I find her too greasy.
Wow.
Yeah, but she's always very shiny.
Yes.
Just look at her. So it's very odd. But I'm not really a fan of her acting. She doesn't really, you know, do it for me as an actress, but she is fantastic in that film. She is like, yes, I'm the plain wife, and she just does it really well. And the interactions between her and Will Ferrell are so good. And then when you bring in Mark Wahlberg, where he literally learns how to do something so well just to take the piss out of somebody, like the ballet dancing.
Yeah.
Is amazing, you know, the jokes about the tuna coming onto land, you know, and it's a bad time, Barb. Every single thing about that film It just excites me. I love it. You know.
Well, I think the reason that it's such a good Will Ferrell film is because it's absurdist humor played straight. You know, the conversation about the tuna hunting the lion, the reason it's funny is because it's two people that are taking the conversation seriously. You know, the Rock and Samuel L. Jackson jumping off a building, and when they talk about it, no one's shocked. No one's like finds it absurd. They're just like, there wasn't even any bushes to aim for. Like there wasn't even an awning, and whatever it is they say.
Yeah, but what ties that entire film together is Michael Keaton's character.
Again, really underappreciated.
He is outstanding, and his references to TLC, and he just plays them off so well, you know, and he knows that, you know, paperwork's not going to get done, so you guys need to get on and do it. You know, he knows that there's bullshit going on, but come on, you guys have to do it this way. I love his jokes about Bed Bath and Beyond. It's just, you know, and then you add Steve Coogan into it and you're like, oh shit, you know, this film is just so good. It's full of so many great jokes, and has brought along one of the longest running arguments that you and I will ever have about Christineth. And I will win hands down every time. You absolutely can.
Okay, so the actress that plays Christineth, which is Will Ferrell's ex-girlfriend in the film, I mistook that actress for a different actress, which was...
you mistook her for Julie Benz at first.
Yes, mistook her for Julie Benz, but then that progressed. So that was unintentional. That was me mistaking... Is it Judy Greer?
Yep.
It progressed into Judy Greer, where I was like, no, it's Judy Greer.
For the longest time.
And the thing was what made that so much fun, and probably parallels the film quite well, is the fact that I did not let you know that I didn't believe that. I let you think that I really thought Judy Greer was Christineth, and you were fuming every time I brought it up. And then you would like Google it, and I would refuse to look.
You were such a dick about it, but it's so funny. And it's just hilarious because now we have this, you come into my house, you get my wife's name wrong.
Yeah.
And then you have him when he's running down the road. You come here and you have sex with my wife, you know,
Yeah.
Just it's incredible. But
it's a very quotable film.
it is. And it's one of those films that me and you could literally live our day-to-day lives having conversations through films, and you and I know it's our own language.
Yeah.
You know, and that is one of those films. So,
Yeah.
God, that film's fucking
Like,
amazing.
it's one of those things where I could say free hot dogs for life, but I can't do drinks. I just can't do it. And you would know what I mean. You would know exactly what I mean. One of the best parts of that film, which it's great initially, and then you forget about it when you rewatch it because you get so obsessed with, especially Mark Wahlberg. I think it's hilarious. But it's Samuel L. Jackson where he gets angry at Will Ferrell and he's like, "I'll stick my hand up your ass, work your mouth like a puppet." That is one of the funniest scenes that I think Samuel L. Jackson's ever been in, because he is pissed. Like he really gets it across.
And it's those altercations between someone altercations between someone like Samuel L. Jackson and then Will Ferrell's character. They just bounce off each other so well, and they just play those characters superbly. What a film. I'm really going to go sit and watch that in a little while. What a film. So that's number 4.
One thing I will say really quickly is and I don't want to go down the whole thing here, but it's weird because it's a Will Ferrell film, and I can only think of 2 that you really love. But it's weird because it's a political film. It's got a lot of political commentary in it, and I don't want us to go down that route, but it's that part of it's strange, because when we saw that at the cinema, and it started to sort of dawn on me fairly early on what the film was going to be about, which is it's like absurdist humor, but it's like a veneer of absurdist humor over the actual storyline, which is about sort of financial misdoings of big bankers and how the government protects bad people because they make a lot of money. I was thinking she's going to hate this. And you came out of it with more quotes than I did. And you've watched that film maybe a dozen more times than I have. And I now only watch it because you stick it on.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry.
But then just to finish that bit off though, then when we went to New York, not long after we saw that film the first time, I was like, need to go everywhere that they were.
Yeah.
This is where they did this scene. This is where they did that scene in the Great Big Ball, which I couldn't get anywhere near because of tourists, but still.
Oh yeah, the like the financial district,
Yeah.
the Golden Bull thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was so cool though. So yeah, what a film. Number 3 is Halloween H2O, the 1998 version.
Fuck.
Yeah.
I know for a fact right now there are going to be some pissed off horror fans.
Yeah. Now, please don't be pissed off with me, okay? Because I'm going to explain the reason why. This literally just tips slightly before the original Halloween, purely because of the order I saw it in. I actually saw Halloween H2O first, and then quickly soon afterwards said to my mum, we rented Halloween H2O from Apollo. And I said to mum, where's the first one? And we went and rented out the first one and then saw that afterwards.
I think it's important quickly to just let people know, because you've referenced it a couple of times. Apollo was a VHS and DVD rental
like Blockbuster.
facility, like Blockbuster. And for people that don't know what Blockbuster was, it was like Netflix, but you had to go out.
You had to go out and buy and rent the physical copy and bring it back. You had like 3 days with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is what I mean. So
Okay, so quick question though.
yeah.
Might be able to redeem yourself here.
Oh.
I'm just saying that there are horror. I don't care. You can like whatever you like. It's just people always want to force their opinion on everyone else. But which do you think is the better film? The original Halloween or Halloween H2O?
Better film, the original.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be honest. I know you.
Yeah.
You think the CGI mask in H2O is shite.
Oh God, it's so bad. It's so bad. Why? Why did you do it? Don't do it.
I could go online right now and buy a Halloween mask. Like, why did they not just buy a Halloween mask?
Oh, I know. But you know what the funny thing is? I think it's like you and I said years ago, was the very first time you and I watched that, which was originally separately, it didn't even click. Like we didn't notice it.
Mm-hmm.
And now every fucking time you watch it, you're like, why? I want to skip it, but I can't. This scene is so good, but let's just pretend your face is blacked out so I can't see it.
When they do like the close up on the mask as well, you're just like, Jesus fucking Christ, guys. Like, could you not have taken the hint?
Yeah.
Like in the edit, would you not have seen that this was bad?
Yeah.
All right, quick question. What's worse?
Mm-hmm.
The CGI mask in H2O
Mhm.
or the cross-eyed death in the original Halloween in the car? Because they are both.
They're both horrendous, but the mask.
Yeah.
Yeah, the mask hands down. But yeah, but that film, again, it kind of brought in like the actors that were quite popular at that time as well. You had Josh Hartnett and you had the kid that was in Jumanji, the original one. I can't remember his name, and Michelle Williamson in it as well.
Robin Williams is in Halloween H2O.
You dick. And I love that it was set in one place. I love that it was set in the school again and you couldn't really go anywhere. And I love that it had her mum in it as well, who played the secretary. I love that film, you know.
Janet Leigh?
Janet Leigh, that's it. Yeah.
God, I had a moment there.
Yeah, me too. But yeah, no, I love that film. So that is number 3 on my list.
All right, so we're down to top 2.
Top 2, which I'm pretty sure you can guess which ones they are.
I think I know which number 1's going to be. But number 2, what genre? What genre is number 2?
Is it? It's
Well, do you not know?
comedy action, I think it would be classed as.
Okay. No, I really don't know what number 2 is.
Do you not know? Right. So number 2, Hot Fuzz.
Of course. Why on earth did I not think of that? Of course it is.
I think
it is
probably
comedy, by the way. How on earth do you think that's not comedy?
Yeah, but also because it's an action.
Yeah. I think first and foremost, though, it's comedy.
Again, it's similar to Haunted House in the sense because it's a film that's it's parodying other films. And I know that things like Hot Shots and Airplane and Naked Gun have
Scary Movie.
and Scary Movie, but I'm talking about the films that parodied action movies.
Oh, I see. Sorry.
And they have done a fantastic job. You have to respect Hot Shots and Airplane and stuff like that. But Hot Fuzz just literally ticks every fucking box of how good that film is.
Mm-hmm.
The comedy in it is amazing. The sound effects the pens clicking, the stapler going, the pictures, the mugshots being taken, the drinks being poured, the jokes about 54 when I'm actually 53.
55 when I was
55 actually 53.
53.
Yeah. Someone from London called for you,
Yeah.
The jokes about taking shortcuts, it's Auntie Jackie's sister's brother's boy. And it's done so quickly and he's so out of breath, everything, the actors in it are amazing. I love every single actor. I love that it's set in England, in an English countryside, in a tiny little village, and every single actor in it is English. Their accents. Am I not right? Because I think
you might be right.
I don't think there's an American playing. Oh no, I have to check. I'm quite confident, but if I'm wrong, I'm happy to be wrong, but I'm quite confident.
Well, do you know what is interesting about it? And it was only brought up to me late last year when I was in Vegas. And I was talking to the tour guide about Hot Fuzz. So he said, I love Hot Fuzz. I love Shaun of the Dead. And he mentioned another film. And I said, yeah, I said it out loud and I'd never thought about it, but you have that thing where you kind of subconsciously think something, but you don't externalize it. And I said, I'm always surprised that Americans get Hot Fuzz. Because Hot Fuzz, really the joke is that if you were to take an American action film and do it in England, it would be so crap.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it would be like, well, no one's got a gun.
Yeah.
It's always small amounts of money or small stakes, but yeah.
It is literally, as Danny says, proper action and shit. Because that's what he thinks he's missing out on.
I feel like this is just an excuse for you to wheel out quotes.
It is. It's so good, but I can do that 24/7 anyway. But I love everything about that film. It's just fantastic. The sound effects are amazing. The way it was filmed was amazing. I love the cast. I love the script. I love the explosions and the gunfire and stuff like that. It just absolutely love it. And again, it's one of those films I've managed to rope into training with my staff.
Mm-hmm.
It's so good. So good. I'm going to sit and watch that again this weekend.
You're a good person to work for because you have to watch like 3.
They got 4 films on the go.
Is it 4? So I know it's, hang on, I know it's Hot Fuzz, Peanut Butter Falcon, Contagion.
So it's 3 at the moment.
Okay, so it's 3. You're probably trying to work. You said to me the other day, you were trying to work out how to get like other guys into it as training. And I was like, I made some joke about, it's persevering with the
truth.
No, it's about persevering with the right thing to do. Even if it seems trivial to someone else, it could be the thread that unravels the whole thing. And you were like, that'll do. I was like, no, I was joking.
But it's so true. Yeah. But no, so Hot Fuzz, what a film. And Edgar Wright, he's really good.
Yeah. Do you know what? I will say one thing. And this is not at you because you're not like this at all. But I am plenty fucking sick of people being smarmy twats about what constitutes a good film and using Edgar Wright as the barometer, as if you're somehow smart for realizing that Edgar Wright's films are funny.
Yeah.
It's I'm a big fan of I Hate Everything. He did it. Big fan of Ralph Seppi. He did it. I'm so bored of this. Like, it's like pointing out that the ocean is wet.
Yeah.
Like, we get it. He's funny. And it's not like his humor goes over everybody's head. He's great with visual humor, which isn't very common anymore. Everything's always said. Whereas he's great at visual comedy. But one thing with Edgar Wright is just the constant need to point out that he's good at what he does, as if that is somehow a profound statement. It drives me fucking mad. But anyway, that's my mind.
And then number 1, which I'm sure you've guessed.
Oh yeah, I know. I can say it right now without any. I would put both of our lives on the line, knowing exactly what number 1 is.
Shit, I better change it then. So it is Scream.
Yeah.
Without a shadow of a doubt, it's Scream.
Hasn't always been.
No, it hasn't always been number 1. But it's always been in the top 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt.
For many, many reasons. Firstly, because it is our film.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
it's a film that kind of defines you and me. Again, it's one of those films where you and I could talk in Scream dialogue and have a conversation for the rest of our lives, and we know what the fuck we're talking about.
Yeah.
It rebirthed the slasher genre. It
Yep.
pays homage to the Halloween films, which then after the first Scream brought Halloween H2O, which pays homage back, which
Kevin
says
Williamson.
thanks. Yeah, which pays thanks back to Scream. Randy is probably one of the best characters.
He's every true horror fan.
Yeah. Every true horror fan.
In especially in his inability to give the correct quote in Scream 2. Like
Yes.
every horror fan is like a smarmy prick.
Yep.
Like I am, like you are.
Yep.
But then you misquote something and it's so embarrassing.
Yeah. But he is pivotal to the narration of the story and the development of the story, you know?
It's actually quite weird because when you think about it, not to go into like a deep dive on Scream at all, but normally the character that is the protagonist is the one that explains what's going on to you. They are your surrogate essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Scream, it's not the main character. It's not Sydney. It's Randy that actually pretty much outlines the events of the film in a protagonist way, but he's nowhere near the protagonist.
Yeah. And it's a film that it doesn't take itself too seriously. It's able to mock itself.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also able to be really true. One of the things that I love about Scream, and it carried on through the sequels, is that the killer will fucking trip over a sofa.
Yeah.
You know, that you don't see that in Halloween because Michael Myers he's almost robotic.
Yeah.
You know, you don't see that in like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. You don't see it in any other of those horror movies, but Scream was not afraid to show the killer running for somebody, tripping arse over
Missing
tit
them, yeah.
and missing them. You know, they was not afraid to, you know, be kicked in the balls and suffer as well, you know, or be knocked down the stairs or have to kind of fumble through furniture and fumble through doors, you know. And, you know, there's a scene in it where the door's trying to be closed on him and he's got his hand through the door and he's just waving the knife around erratically.
It's like desperation.
Yeah, and it's very real. And I think that's what is in part quite scary about it because, again, it's a character that its face is emotionless, but at the same time you think it's quite a funny face.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what's scary about it because you don't know who's underneath it.
It's over the top.
Yeah.
It's a very over the top. It's like it's an incredibly stupid costume to wear if you're going to go out killing people where you need to be agile and mobile.
Yeah.
Because it's a fucking like a dress.
Yeah.
With a mask that covers almost your entire eyes.
Yeah.
So you can't see what you're doing and
exactly.
Yeah, I mean if he'd have been they even make reference to it, obviously, in like Scream 3, that he's going to be invincible.
Yeah.
You're going to have to cut off his head, cryogenically freeze
his ass.
Yeah.
Yeah. It has one of the best opening scenes of, I'd probably say, of most films of any any horror movie, which would be the opening scene with Drew Barrymore.
Mm-hmm.
And that whole sequence is amazing. And the other two great things, is one that it gave birth to Sydney's character. And Neve Campbell is amazing as Sydney. And she's amazing as Sydney right the way throughout. And you feel for her because in the beginning, she's like, she doesn't like horror movies because they're always stupid girls running up the stairs instead of running out the door. Subsequently, you know, within what's essentially minutes of that scene, she's doing the same thing,
mm-hmm.
you know, so she's a fantastic character. And it gave birth to some of the best parodies and the parody films after that with Dewey's character and how he is ripped the piss out of in things like I Know What You Did Last Friday the 13th.
Shriek, If You Know What I Did Last. Okay, so I'll quickly explain this. Previous to Scary Movie, I believe it was actually previous.
It was previous, yeah.
There was a parody film of slashers and Christine and essentially it bordered around Scream, but it also had
kind of the 80s, 90s.
80s, 90s. It was basically like Scary Movie, but the window of films it was mocking was slightly earlier.
Yeah.
And it was called Shriek, If You Know What I Did Last Friday the 13th. And it's really funny. I think you can get it on Prime at the moment. And if you're a fan of Scary Movie or of slashers or of horror, it's worth watching. It's a bit dumb, but it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. But it gave birth to so many good parodies. And, Dewey's character, he's ridiculous in those films, but it's also probably what that person would really be like in real life.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't take himself too seriously. There are jokes in the first film with his sister, with Tatum, about her bringing Sydney home with him and stuff. And then you take that into the Scary Movie parodies, where you've got situations with the Hoover and stuff. So there's just so many things about that film that I love.
It's also, one of the cleanest examples of promoting female empowerment without it being a fucking gimmick. Like, horror's always been a weird oxymoron when it comes to that stuff. It's always been a bit contradictory because usually the men are the ones that are the bad guys. They're not the good people in the film. It's very rare that you get a female murderer in life, but in a horror film it does happen. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. Some prick is now typing away desperately in his basement, but it's very rare. But it did it without trying to celebrate itself for doing it. She was just the person that survived, as opposed to the reason she survived is because she's this gender or she's this racial group or whatever. It was actually just about, she was a character who was smart, who survived, and it promoted it without doing it in a way that was almost like, the absolute doldrums of film. The worst of the worst of the worst is Black Christmas 2019. It's the worst film ever made. Everyone involved should be fired out of a cannon into the sun.
That one.
And the reason is because it was so pandering and so condescending to women and so insulting to men. Like, it got every single part of what it was trying to do wrong in such a hilarious way. Not funny as in a funny film, but hilarious in the sense of watching someone trying to walk up an escalator that's going down, and an hour and a half later they're still doing it. That's what Black Christmas was. Whereas Scream, it did it subconsciously. You didn't question why she gets away. Because why does a woman get away? Anything stupid like that. You didn't also think, the reason she got away is because they wanted to promote a strong, powerful woman. No, her character gets away. It was organic. It made sense.
Just perfect. And then again, the last thing that makes Scream so good, and it was obviously as the series progressed, it moved with time, is in the first film, there are no mobile phones, with the exception of the phone that the killer is using. And there's the scene in the police station where he's like, the
what are you doing
sheriff,
with a cellular telephone, son?
Why? Everyone's got him, sir. And it's just, now it's not even a question. And it was the same as in Scream 4. It wasn't a question, the use of mobile phones and social media. But at the time, it was so pivotal. And you couldn't have made Scream how it was like that. You couldn't make that today. Because those are such key elements.
It's an unintended consequence of mobile phones. They have kind of killed the horror genre. Because you can't really promote a situation unless you do like the really shit cop-outs, which is like, there's no signal. I dropped my phone. Or Frozen, not Disney Frozen, but the horror movie Frozen, where it's like, leave your phones in the locker. Oh, no, it's okay. I can go grab it. No, leave it in the locker because we need it for a fucking plot device. Like, it makes no sense.
Or you just bypass the phone, like in Amusement is the perfect example of it. Well, why aren't you just calling the cops? Why are you calling the boyfriend that's probably trapped with the killer?
Well, Amusement's
not one to be referenced, by the way.
One of the worst films ever made.
But so that's my
the
top 10.
So if we do this together then, so my number 10 was Die Hard with a Vengeance. Yours was?
John Wick.
My number 9 was The Dark Knight. Yours was?
Expendables 2.
My number 8 was Spotlight.
Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark.
Number 7, A Ghost Story.
Haunted House.
Number 6, Hereditary.
Halloween, the 1978.
Number 5, Scream.
Peanut Butter Falcon.
Number 4, Zodiac.
Other Guys.
Number 3, Halloween.
Halloween H2O.
Number 2, 1917.
Hot Fuzz.
And number 1, Revenant.
Scream.
So there you go. We are not on the same page in a lot of places there, but loosely, I guess you could say we are.
Yeah.
I think that's a pretty good start off episode to kind of lay the groundwork of what we want to do here. We want this to be kind of fun and informal, and it's obviously fair to give some kind of context to the opinions that we're going to put forward when we review stuff or when we just talk about certain subjects. So I think that's a pretty good start.
Yeah. Also, it's quite cool that you and I have been together for a long time now, and movies are a big part of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And you and I can have completely different opinions and different likes and dislikes in movies and still really enjoy having a conversation about them and can still really appreciate each other's favorites or the best of films and, you know, stuff like that. So, you know, because there are a lot of couples I know that won't sit and watch films together because, oh, they don't like this type of film or they don't like this type of film. But you can find films somewhere along the lines that you both be into.
Yeah, I think you can find a through line where you're both happy. And I also think you shouldn't force what you like onto somebody else, whether that be on the fucking internet or in a relationship. Like, you shouldn't treat your opinion as gospel, and you shouldn't treat someone else's as invasive. They like something, you don't. You like something, they don't. In our relationship, you go to the cinema on your own and watch films I wouldn't watch, and I go to cinema on my own and watch films that you wouldn't watch.
Yeah.
And that's the way it is. There are plenty of films we watch together that we hate. There are plenty of films that we watch together that we love. But it's not about forcing the other person to like something that they don't.
Yeah.
That's the important thing, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I think that's a pretty good way to wrap it up anyway.
Yeah.
So I think the first episode we'll follow this with will be our 1978 Halloween to 2018 Halloween comparison. I think that's the way we'll go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I think we'll do what the movie did and bypass everything past Halloween 1978.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff to come. I think we won't focus primarily on horror, but it will be in there. I think there's not many people doing stuff to do with horror where it's not a fandom.
Yeah.
So we'll take some notes. We'll put together some reviews and whatnot. And I think also what we will do as soon as this bullshit pandemic passes and normality rears its ugly head, we will do some mini reviews, which will be spoilerific, but we will talk about films that we've just been to see as an initial reaction. Because one thing that I've learned from you, and one thing that I've learned about myself from you, is what you think about a film when you walk out the cinema compared to what you think the next day compared to what you think 6 months later. It's very different.
Yeah.
So I think that'll be really fun. But I think this is a good start.
Yeah, I've enjoyed that.
So thanks everyone for listening. This was awfully long, but I appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. And remember, kids, movies don't create psychos. Movies make psychos more creative.